Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Well, as much as it drives Fuzzybutts all over this place absolutely crazy when they hear me say it, I am the host of this show, your big dog, Luke Robinson, back again this week. And look over there to your right or left, who we have next to us. It's Ginger Morgan. She's our co-host, and she's also the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I do want to remind everybody that it is the holiday season and our calendars are out. This year, the name of the calendar is Dogs Helping Dogs because we've let dogs without cancer come in and raise funds for dogs with cancer so we can do raise awareness, do some education, and hopefully fund some more research. So, and you can find the new calendar at puppyup.org/shop.
Yes, you guys do a wonderful job, Ginger, with the calendar.
Thank you.
Year. Artistically, the puppy dogs look absolutely gorgeous. Are we still just doing dogs, or I know one year we added a cat in there.
We've had cats have entered the contest on several times, but this year there are only dogs in there.
Because cats have fuzzy butts too.
They do.
Absolutely right. On that, what a perfect segue. Let's introduce our guest since he already chimed in. It's a tremendous honor. Ginger, I'm excited about the topic this week because we talk a lot about Western medicine. We talk a lot about cancer, traditional cancer treatments, and we just don't talk enough about all the other available tools in our toolboxes. In our toolbox, because there are so many resources, and for all the reasons that we're going to get into today, our guest has a tremendous amount of wisdom and information for our audience. On that note, it's an honor to introduce Dr. Robert Silva. How are you, sir? Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends.
All right, it's great to be here. I came on because of the name, Fuzzybutts. Who could who could deny a podcast that's named Fuzzybutts?
Exactly.
Absolutely. I had been wanting to do this for years, and I could never come up with a name that ever worked for me. And then all of a sudden, one day, it was like, it's Fuzzybutts and Friends. Who could, even if we talk about cancer all the time, you still have to be happy, right?
It was a brilliant choice. And I think, because cancer is such a serious concern, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of lightness of emotions around it if we can find that,
Exactly.
Absolutely. There's a line I was talking about. We just did had a podcast interview with a pet cemetery, Memorial Gardens, and it was obviously not a lofty conversation, but our guest, what was great is that I just noticed is that sometimes in life I toe that line between when I'm talking about difficult topics, I'm on that line between either crying or laughing inappropriately, I feel like. But it is a good line to be on, though, Dr. Silva, don't you think? Because that's the line of life, right? It's also the seriousness. It's also about the entropy, and it's about the things that we know are coming. But it's about enjoying it as well. And you're from Colorado. I see your sweater, so you must be enjoying this time of year.
Well, we haven't really gotten much snow yet, and I'm no longer a skier. My age has gotten the better of my body. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. I think we're going to have a pretty good snowfall this winter.
Well, it's been a few years since I've been out there. I love Colorado, especially Colorado Springs. Has a lot of history for us, and of course, Fort Collins, which is where CSU is located as well. But before we get into all the business side of things, we do like to start it off with Fuzzybutts, oddly enough. So, Dr. Silva, do you have Fuzzybutts? I'm sure you have some.
Well, I do, and my comment about cats and fuzzy butts specifically was because of the two cats that we've just have just joined our household, and they are both Maine Coon cats. And I don't know if you're familiar with that breed, but they're called coons because their tail looks like a big raccoon tail. It's big and fluffy, and then they've got these pantaloons, in their back legs, which are just fuzzy as can be. And so yeah, we've got two young Maine Coon cats that are wreaking havoc in our household, and then I have my older Labrador. I'm a Labaholic, and he's a rescue dog. He was found at 4 months of age with a broken leg and dislocated hip and a bunch of trauma, a bunch of PTSD. So he's been my test case for working with anxiety.
Well, good for you. I love your description, pantaloons. That perfectly describes the Maine Coon cats, and you're right, they're a gorgeous breed. So you're Labs, I'm Pyrenees, I'm on my fifth. I think I don't know if I chose them or they chose me for better or worse, but Ginger, she likes the beautiful breeds. So you've got some of the feline fuzzy butts and the canine fuzzy butts. They're at your house. Excellent. Well, we'd like to start it in addition to talking about the fuzzy butts, also your origin story. I know I've read your CV. I've done a little bit of due diligence on you, and you've done a tremendous amount, my friend. So tell us a little bit about your origin story, how you began your journey on the road to fuzzy butts.
Yeah, and if anything, I mean, I've lived a long life. I'm 74, so I've had a lot of time and opportunity to do all those things. But I'm not done yet. I feel like I'm at the peak of my career, and I'm just kind of getting started. But to tell you my story, I was born at a very early age.
It took me a second. Ginger got it immediately. That's not surprising.
And and I always resonated with the animals. Wanted, my folks wanted me to be an MD, but I wanted to be a veterinarian. Took me a little time to get into vet school. I didn't have the best of grades coming out of college, but I did. Took me 5 applications over 7 years. I got in 1982. When I graduated, I thought I knew it all, and thought I could do battle with all the nasty diseases out there. And, it took me a little bit of time out there, a couple of years, to realize that there are some very complicated chronic diseases that, as good as our conventional medicine is in addressing them to a point, they don't really go all the way. And so I started looking for other solutions to help these patients that were not getting good resolution with conventional approaches. So that's basically where I got started. And I started with diet, and I found a book by Richard Pitcairn where he talked about making homemade diets, and I copied that. And I amazingly found that with some of my patients that had these complicated chronic diseases, if I just switched them to a homemade diet, properly created, complete and balanced, but fresh, wholesome food, they started to improve, as compared to the same old kibble or the canned. That got my interest. That got my interest quite a bit. It was really stimulated by the pet parents that were saying, can't you do anything holistic? Can't you teach us how to, so I started looking at it, being driven by consumer demand, and found that it actually worked. After that, I'm a backpacker, and I do a lot of kind of survival stuff. And so I knew how to identify plants that were edible and toxic. So it was a short path from there. And with our poisonous plants class in second year vet school, where we walk out in the fields and learn about all the poisonous plants that livestock can come into, I started learning about herbal medicine, realizing that sometimes the difference between a toxic plant and a medicinal plant is the dosage. And so that was kind of how I got started. And it just kind of one thing came after the other. As Colorado legalized cannabis in 2000 for human medical use, a lot of patients started coming in to my office from pet parents who had been giving them some form of cannabis. And sometimes we had disasters, and sometimes we had really good results. So that got my interest as well. And I started looking at the science, and I'm a bit of a nerd. And, when I look at the phytopharmacology of cannabis, it was fascinating. And so I really dug down on that and started teaching vets about cannabis, because I think vets really needed to learn. We didn't have as many studies then as we do now. I started in 2014, actually, lecturing on CBD and cannabis to vets. And then, CBD's got, it's pretty much almost mainstream at this point in time. And mushrooms are having their moment. And especially if we're talking about cancer, mushrooms are one of the first things that we think of when we're looking for something other than the conventional approach to cancer. And because I believe strongly in the value of these alternative approaches, it doesn't mean that I'm rejecting conventional medicine. Right. Sometimes cancer is so aggressive that it's going to kill the patient before they even have a chance to let the natural things take their time to have a benefit. So I believe strongly in keeping the patient alive long enough that we can allow the natural therapies to do something good for them. And so that's kind of where it came from. 25 years ago, I was recruited by RX Vitamins, which is a veterinary nutraceutical company, to develop their line of products, which I did. I developed all 40 of those products over the 25 years I was with them. And because the mission of this company was to sell complementary products, supplements to conventional vets, I started lecturing to the conventional vets about all the principles that underlie the value of using herbs, of using nutraceuticals, of diet, and didn't even have all the stuff about the microbiome back then, and so that's what I've been doing. And surprisingly, I've been finding myself really enjoying the educational process. I really enjoy teaching and sharing with my colleagues the excitement that I have around this knowledge, around these supplements, and what they can do to enhance host reserves, to improve the clinical outcomes, to improve, to improve success rates.
Absolutely. I love using the word clinical outcomes. I prefer that, because success, there's so much that leaves so much to interpret. It's interesting on the talking points. I put in there limitations of Western medicine, and I absolutely believe that. Is that, and you said it, is that it's not you disregard them or you're saying that you're better, it's that you augment them. And just looking at how you describe that, how that the type of medicine is commonly described as holistic medicine, is that you tend to look at both that side, the Western medicine, and the other side, the Eastern medicine as well. I remember I got into a rather lengthy conversation with an MD physician about Eastern versus Western, and he was quite confident that the Western medicine was superior. And I said, yeah, but in all fairness, they've been doing it a lot longer over there, though. So I'm not really sure that we can count on that. So it surprises me, and I'm sure it surprises you, that you've spent so many years doing all this learning, that it's still so disconnected, though, right? That there still is that. Doesn't it surprise you that you don't see more alternative, holistic medicine practice here in the United States?
I don't really know I guess I don't really know how to answer that question. I don't really know what to compare it to in terms of the amount of holistic medicines practiced elsewhere. I will say that there has been quite an increase in interest on the part of veterinarians, and particularly veterinary students, in practicing holistic medicine. And I speak at many holistic veterinary student clubs about a variety of different topics. And typically, one of the things they want to know is, how can they prepare to go out and do a holistic career? And I tell them, because I really believe strongly in this, that in order to practice holistic or alternative medicine, you need to know what you're rejecting. You need to know how to practice good conventional medicine, so you know what to pick and choose amongst conventional medicine modalities. Now, I think that the comment that Western medicine is better than Eastern medicine or whatever, I think it's BS personally. I think that both of them have good points, and both of them have points that aren't so good. Right. And that's why blending them together and taking the best of each for the benefit of the individuality of the patient, because that's the other thing that we learn with holistic medicine, is that each patient's an individual, that we don't treat them as a diagnosis, we treat them as an individual. And that helps us, especially with some of these more challenging problems that are difficult to treat. I think if you can really address it individually, you have a much better chance. We're seeing this now in cancer therapy, because we're taking pieces of the tumor and we're doing a DNA analysis on it, or we're doing an in vitro study to see which chemotherapy works the best. We're really, it really works the best when we individualize those treatments to the patient. And that, I think, is the essence of holistic or integrative medicine.
Yeah, you said a second ago, conventional medicine has good points, Eastern medicine has good points. I would say a little bit differently. They both have good data points. Each of them have good data points that brought together provides a more complete picture. And that was beautifully said. I noticed on your CV that you spent some time studying at the Chi Institute. Is that right? Or you work with them, with Dr. Shea?
I have adjunct faculty.
Faculty, okay.
Yeah, Dr. Shea and I, in 2000, in the year 2000, the International Veterinary Acupuncture Society put on a basic course in Chinese herbal medicine in Boulder, and I was responsible for teaching that class along with Dr. Shea, and that was before he established his Chi University. And he was actually testing some of his lecture notes and some of his approaches, on the veterinarians that were, taking that herb class. So I have taught some there at the Chi Institute, and I formulate some products for them on their herbal side, the Jintong herbal. I've been doing some formulations for them as well. I really enjoy. It's surprising. I like teaching. I like practice and I like medicine, but I really found I like teaching. But I also really enjoy the process of formulating and designing products, that have specific clinical outcomes. It's almost like cooking. It's a very creative, but at the same time intellectual process. And so I had a lot of fun with RX Vitamins with those 40 products, and I've done about 5 or 6 now for Jintong, and I've got about 9 now for the mushroom company I'm with, Real Mushrooms. So that's a real fun part for me to be able to create something and then see that it can actually do some good out there to the pets, for the pets.
Right, but let's stay on that though, because one of the arguments of conventional medicine versus Eastern is clinical trial, the actual data, whereas Eastern tends to look more of the N of one, right? That there's data that can be derived from that. We typically look more towards a process by which regulatory approval occurs, right? And so that right there is the distinction, is that whenever like a guy like you, I'm trying to say it correctly, is that you have all these wonderful ideas, you've learned so many things out there in the field, you've seen it, you've seen evidence and proof of it, and now you want to formulate it, you want to create it and commercialize it. Is that over here on the West now we have this very expensive regulatory process that requires clinical trials, which, as you know, are very expensive. So do you see that being a cost prohibitive factor or consideration, or a big difference between the two?
Well, I think cost is probably the reason why you're not seeing these controlled trials of supplements as compared to pharmaceuticals. It has, in order to monetize the research, you have to have a patented product. You have to have something that's unique. Otherwise, you're spending a lot of money so your competitors can use your information. But it's not about there anything being intrinsically different between a pharmaceutical and a dietary supplement in terms of their effectiveness or their safety. You're just talking about FDA drug approval. So there's no reason why we have to approve supplements for drugs. The process to have that happen is incredibly prolonged and Byzantine and expensive. There's no reason why we can't create a category called dietary supplements for pets. We have a category like that for humans called dietary supplements for humans, for which there's an act of Congress that allows the FDA to regulate them. We have no similar act of Congress that allows the FDA to regulate animal supplements. Animal supplements, the FDA is very binary: food or drug. Is it a food? Is it a drug? Which is it? What's a supplement? Is it a food or is it a drug? It's both in many regards. So, the really important part about supplements, because is their safety and their purity and their quality control. And so there is a trade group called the National Animal Supplement Council. It's been around since 2001. They've got over 300 animal health companies that are members. And in order to be a member, you have to allow third-party auditing of your manufacturing facilities to ensure that they meet CGMP FDA standards. So, and if they do, and they'll also pull at random products off the shelf and analyze them to see if they meet label claims, and they have certain labeling templates that are required. If you meet all these requirements, you can put the seal, the NASC seal. That's NASC, and the website is nasc.cc if you want to look at it some more. And so many veterinarians and many consumers these days, when they're looking for a supplement for animals, look for that seal, because it tells you that the quality control has gone into that product. Whether it works or not, that's a whole different story, and that may have to do with whether the supplement itself actually works or whether the supplement itself is absorbed or given at the right dosage to work.
I think that's a novel and a wonderful idea, having a dietary supplement for pets category that doesn't have the extensive clinical trial and all the different phases and all the regulatory hurdles and all the costs that come with it. Because you're right, companies look at it merely as an ROI, right? Is that I know it's going to cost all these things to make it, develop it, and commercialize it, and I got to make sure I earn income over the lifetime of that product. To earn a decent return of investment. And the tough thing is, I won't say sad, the hard tough thing is because we're talking about the lives of our loved ones. And when it's a pet parent like myself, where I've lost 3 of my dogs to cancer, Ginger has lost more than that, including my own as well. And when we go in, that there are distinctions of FDA and regulatory this and clinical trials this. And all those things fall apart because as a pet parent, I just want some hope. I want something that offers a therapeutic benefit, a better quality of life, or whatever the case it is, if it isn't cancer. So,
Right.
So that's a wonderful, novel idea. Have you received any traction with that? That new classification, the dietary supplement for pets?
Well, as you know, the FDA has done a very poor job of regulating CBD. For people and for pets.
Right.
The reason why they can't do that, and it took them 5 or 6 years or however long they did. The reason they can't do that, they finally told us this year, is because CBD was originally approved as a drug because GW Pharma, the pharmaceutical company in UK that had put the CBD under FDA drug approval for epilepsy, okay, the Epidiolex, they filed that new drug application before CBD was sold as a supplement on the general market. And so the FDA has a rule, you can't have a supplement if it is first an approved drug.
Yep.
So unless there's an act of Congress. Now we know Congress is broken, and so what are we going to get? What's going to happen? I don't know. But Congress needs to pass a law that says, FDA, we say that you can go ahead and regulate animal supplements, which we understand are not drugs and are not food, which is what they've done with the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act of 1994. That's called DSHEA. That was done for humans. And so that's why we saw such a huge proliferation of dietary supplement industry for humans. And then the pet parents, they want to give their 4-legged family members the same benefits they themselves get from supplements. So many people are using supplements for themselves. That's one reason we're seeing such a rise in this industry. And so, they're gonna reach out for the same supplements, that they might use for themselves. And that's where we see this whole rise in the animal supplement industry without the congressional legislation that supports any kind of regulation for it.
But God forbid any of our lives depended upon an act of Congress, for God's sake. And especially our companion animals, because we know that's not a priority for them. That's just never going to, given all the other crises, that's going to be so far down on the list. Let's talk about, so we have I think a good framework going into the problem with the mechanism for commercialization here over in the States. Let's talk about your work in nutraceuticals, because that I'm very well versed in cannabis and CBD, and I look forward to getting on that because that's a big topic I'm very passionate about. But let's start with nutraceuticals because I know less about that. So talk to us about some of the exciting, interesting things that most pet parents don't know about nutraceuticals that just aren't being prescribed or used.
Well, nutraceuticals are kind of a made-up word. It combines nutrition and pharmaceutical, which is kind of the essence of a dietary supplement. And there's different definitions for what constitutes a nutraceutical. I define it as being an extracted molecule or concentrate of a food or a plant that has some bioactivity, some biomedical activity. The FDA compliant definition for a nutraceutical is a material that normalizes health but does not have either nutritional nor drug-like effects. So the FDA says it normalizes health is how they describe what it does, because they can't say that it treats or cures, because that would then be a drug. So
it is a strange name, though. I don't want to lose that, because the way I thought of it is that, gosh, that's awfully similar to the fake balls they put in neutered dogs. I can't recall what they call those.
those are called nutraceuticals. Yeah. But you spell it differently too. You spell Nutra. So
Okay.
but nutraceuticals basically, are just more concentrated extracts that have activity. For instance, you could take ginger root. Ginger is one of the most amazing herbs there is. Very safe, been used for years. It's a food. It's also a medicine, and you could take some raw ginger root and grate it, and put that into a cup of water and steep it and drink it, and you'd have some ginger tea. But you could also dry it. And if you dry it, that would change some of the molecular structures in it, which would also change some of its activity. Or you could take it and you could pharmaceutically extract the gingerols that are in there, the shagols, which are the active ingredients that give it that sharp, spicy taste, and just use those directly, to treat things. Now, we think in complementary medicine that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, that when you treat with the whole plant, or the whole extract, it's much more effective than one single element. We see that with CBD. For instance, there's a form of CBD called a CBD isolate, which is just like 99.7% pure CBD, has nothing else in it, and it works, but it takes higher dosages. And it works, but it has more likely to have side effects. Whereas if you use the whole plant extract, you can use a lower dose to get the same effects and fewer side effects. So that's kind of what, so there's a lot of different things that could be nutraceuticals, but basically they're extracts of foods and plants that have biologic activity, without saying they have medical activity.
Sure. So I would never have thought the CBD would have fit under that, but now it completely makes sense, because obviously it is a plant extract. And yes, I want to get to that, but it's amazing the magic of the cannabis plant, how many medical mysteries it holds, and we just demonize the whole plant and threw it out. Because my eldest dog, Indiana, he has peripheral neuropathy amongst being old and stuff, and we're on a pretty high dosage of CBD every day. And and to me, it's part of our daily routine, so it's magical. Are there any other before we get into your mushroom business, which I find equally fascinating, because there have been some that shown that have anti-cancerous properties that I'm excited to get into. But are there any other nutraceuticals that pet parents aren't commonly aware of that are out there that you've helped develop and work on that are exciting?
Well, what comes to mind, and it's not necessarily one that I've worked on, but it's one that I speak about, and it kind of relates to CBD, but it's naturally occurring in our body. So it's a molecule like CBD that's naturally occurring in our body and naturally occurring in foods. And it's got a long name called palmitoyl ethanolamide, which we abbreviate PEA. And PEA, because it works within the whole endocannabinoid system, there's several very good studies showing that when you use it together with CBD, it's more substantial as a pain reliever. There's other studies that show if you use it alone in cats who have a type of skin disease called rodent ulcer, which is a kind of inflammatory condition where they get something on their lip that's hardened and red. It can treat that. It's tasteless, odorless, safe. You just mix it in with the food. Dogs, they've done studies in dogs where dogs that have atopic dermatitis, have allergies, get better. They stop having any symptoms after about a month or two on this stuff. So I think, palmitoyl ethanolamide could be a game changer for those allergic or painful pets. We've also found that there's 2 studies now with CBD for allergic animals that show that CBD can reduce itching, although it doesn't change the problems with the skin, the redness and rashes and eruptions and things.
Is PEA commercially available right now?
Very much.
If for dogs, is it
Well,
something?
yeah, it's available for dogs from a pharmaceutical company called Decra, Dechra. Decra makes another drug called trilostane that we use for Cushing's disease in dogs, but they've really been starting to add on a lot of nutraceuticals to their lineup. They're a pretty impressive company as far as a pharmaceutical, So they've got a soft chew for dogs and they've got a powder for cats. But I have one on my own website that's encapsulated, and I buy it from a human. It's not labeled for animal use, but it's more potent and less expensive than what you can get from Decro.
Do you think there would be a benefit with Indiana giving him both the CBD and the PEA?
For his pain.
Yeah, correct. Well, he does. I mean,
neuropathy, yes, definitely. And you might want to look at some other cannabinoids as well, other than CBD, and some mushrooms. I'll make some suggestions.
Wow, that's exciting. I haven't heard about that. Let's get into it right now. Unless there's some other new nutraceutical, let's go with it right now, because a big part of your what you do right now is mushrooms, and that's such an unexplored field, right?
Well, I'm exploring it.
You are the explorer.
I've just finished my book, my mushroom book. I'm calling it There's a Mushroom for That. And I'm going to self-publish it because I want to get it out more quickly, but we're going to distribute it widely. And I'm doing an online course on mushrooms for veterinarians with an online Australian company called the College of Integrative Veterinary Therapeutics, CIVTEDU.org. That's coming up in early to mid-spring. Next month in December, there's a big trend amongst pet parents to attend these pet summits, which are these online events where they have multiple veterinarians giving like a pitch for what they do, and what they can do. And it's kind of a way of them marketing themselves to all these pet parents. Oftentimes they'll get as many as 20 or 30,000 views. And so I'm doing a workshop for these guys, the 1st and 3rd of December, one whole day on mushrooms and one whole day on CBD, and that's open to the pet parent. So
hold on 1 second. I got to stop because I have a very hyperactive brain and I lose things. I'm very interested to learn about this pet summits. That's exciting because we're all
petsummits.com.
Pet Summits. That's not your organization. That's a separate deal.
No, that's an Australian company. It's a veterinary media company that puts these events on, and they make money from it, and veterinarians use it as an opportunity to market themselves, and it works really well
because, as you know, educating pet parents is almost a Herculean task. It's incredibly difficult because we're an amorphous demographic. We look all different and shaped all differently and whatnot, but so it's hard to really get education, get the right information to the right people that need it at the right time, right?
And this is why we're seeing this phenomenon happening. After the pandemic, I was kind of sequestered in the pandemic, and I still was working with RX Vitamins. I lost, RX Vitamins was sold in the middle of the pandemic, and bingo, I had to look for some new work to do. And when I emerged and the pandemic was over, I found that there are all these mechanisms of education for pet parents now that veterinarians are doing it. They're calling it educational or health coaching. And so they have these subscription online events, subscription platforms where they may interview people, they may give little talks, they may have conversations, they may try to help pet parents with their pets' medical problems, within the context of remote telemedicine, and trying to do that correctly and ethically. So I'm getting involved in that now too, and I'm going to be creating my own platform, my own educational platform next year. I'll pair it with that book. I've got several ebooks and things, and it'll focus on the use of mushrooms and the use of cannabis, blended with conventional medicine, blended with integrative medicine. And that's kind of the nature of my book as well. I've got 7 different pet stories in it that I show how I address it using conventional medicine, how I use it alternative medicine, and then specifically how I use CBD and mushrooms. And I even have a part in there about how to use THC, even though THC is illegal for a veterinarian to recommend because it's a Schedule 1. A pet parent could, in any of those legal states, can go into a dispensary and buy THC, give it to their dog, and send them straight to the ER. And a veterinarian is not allowed to do any harm prevention and give any advice about how to use that. So that's
Yes,
one of my
yes, that's
that's got me
huge.
upset.
That's a huge pet peeve of mine, and we're going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
But I love the 7 stories. I love the layout. And can you give maybe a couple of those stories with the mushrooms? Can you give that in advance, or we have to wait to the book?
No. I'm actually I'm recording a video later this afternoon or tomorrow morning that has a couple of these stories on them, so it's good to repeat them.
Yes.
I think probably the most remarkable cancer story that I can tell is about a dog named Grover, who I worked. I'm not really in practice anymore. I'm retired from practice to teach and develop products and work with companies. But I can't keep my hands out of it. I love giving advice, like helping the animals. I like the intellectual, intrigue of trying to figure out what's going on. So I took on Grover, who had hemangiosarcoma, which is that very aggressive, nasty cancer of the spleen. And typically, we recommend that they remove the spleen prior to doing anything at all, whether they're going to do chemo or just survive the dog with nothing. Removing the spleen is recommended, because the spleen is going to keep rupturing, keep bleeding out into the abdomen, keep seeding metastases throughout the abdomen. So we removed the spleen. So when I spoke with them, they said that they had been given the fear of God by their conventional vet, and that's what they didn't want to go that way. So they were looking for an alternative vet, which is how they came to me. And they said that I said, well, we need to get that spleen out of there. If we're going to use all these alternative therapies, we can't have that big diseased spleen in there. And they said, no, we don't want that surgery. We don't want any surgery. If he's only got a month or 2 to live, and I have to say, I agree with that thinking. If he's only got a couple of months to live, why do we want to put him under, anesthesia and surgical recovery? Even though the surgery is quite fast and quite easy and the recovery is quite quick, I understand how pet parents feel about that, and I don't disagree with them. I try to be careful how I direct the pet parent in their decision making, because I don't. You want to make sure that they make the decision, they have the right information to do it. It's a slippery slope. When you recommend euthanasia and the owner thinks it's too soon, then they get angry with you. It's a very delicate time in the relationship between the vet and the pet parent to navigate and make that work out well for the pet parent and for the animal, that they don't suffer. So anyway, okay, so he refused splenectomy, and normally they only live a month at the most because they keep rupturing. But I had him. I put him on I put him on some Chinese herbs that are specific for hemangiosarcoma. One's called Yunnan Baiyao, one's called the modified Shui Wu Zhuyu Tong. So we used those 2. Plus there's one from Jing Tong Herbal from Dr. Shea's called Wei Qi Booster. We put him on that. Put him on CBD. He lives in a state where he has legal THC, so I showed him how he can put together a 1-to-1 ratio THC CBD and how to dose that to not send the dog to the ER. So we got that going. And then we put him on a high dosage of turkey tail mushroom. Now, there were 2 studies that were published, one in 2012, one in 2022, looking at turkey tail and hemangiosarcoma. And it did show there is a benefit, not as great a benefit as we would hope as with chemo, but still a pretty good benefit. And so especially for people that don't want to go chemo and the animal still is in a good state, going with just the mushrooms and alternative therapy can maybe give nearly 8 months, of life, which is what we got with Grover. He did really well. He lost weight. He was running around. He was happy as can be, even better than he was before he got the cancer, except that they couldn't keep him from running around. And he'd run around and he'd damage that spleen and it would start to bleed again. And so the first time it happened, I said, let's get that spleen out of there. But they were adamant. And, you just have to go with what they're saying. And even if you don't agree with that, I think the dog probably could still be alive if we'd gotten that spleen out early. But anyway, he wound up having a good 8-9 months. The parents were really happy about it. It was a success. So that was one case of that. Another case would be looking at anxiety and PTSD, and we could look at my my own dog Ollie, and Ollie is one of the stories in my book as well. He's a lab that was found at 4 months of age with a broken leg and was a stray. So with Ollie, I created a product specifically for Ollie, actually, for his PTSD, that is a chew that contains two types of mushrooms in it. One mushroom is called lion's mane. The other mushroom is called reishi. Right now, lion's mane is the most popular mushroom in North America today because of its ability to improve memory and cognition and stress. In fact, there are a few preliminary studies with early Alzheimer's patients that's showing some stability, at least in terms of lack of progression, or maybe some improvements in memory. So we put, and the reishi has been used by Zen masters for centuries as a meditation aid because it's very settling and very calming and grounding. So we put those two, and then I added tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin, and theanine, another precursor to serotonin, which gives green tea. It's Zen, taurine, catnip, valerian, passion flower, and lemon balm. And these are very, very calming chews. And then I blend those with my own branded tinctures. I have a tincture that's a blend of CBD with another cannabinoid called CBG. And CBG has been shown to be about 10 to 20 times more potent than CBD as an anti-inflammatory agent, which means it also is good for neuropathies and pain. So I can give you a link to that product if you'd
I
like
would
to.
love that. Absolutely.
Very potent. 60 milligrams of CBD per milliliter, 2,700 milligrams per bottle. So it's very potent. And we know that CBD is best absorbed and gets the highest blood levels and has the best clinical effect when you give it with a little bit of fatty food. So that's what we try to do. And the quintessential fatty food for a dog is canned cat food. So that makes it easy. I just take some canned cat food, put the drops in there, and he's like, okay, but it's also in a very bland medium chain triglyceride oil, so it doesn't really have that much of a problem. So so the combination of those two on a daily basis took several months. But Ollie now actually smiles at me versus looking worried, like I'm going to hurt him or something. And he's in much better shape with that. And then
How old is Ollie?
I'm sorry.
How old is Ollie?
He's 10.
Okay.
He's 10. I've got him. I adopted him when he was 6 months of age. They did
I have one of my kids. I have the older kid that's got peripheral neuropathy, so I'm excited about that, and I want to learn more about that. But the other one, similar situation. His parents, if you call them that, left him outside all the time and chained to a tree stump, and he wrapped it around his leg, and it lacerated, got infected, and they amputated it, and that's when I got him as a foster. And so he has tremendous PTSD and trauma from that. So that helped Ollie out substantially.
He could be better, but I'll take what I can get. I'm continuing with it. I've been thinking about trying microdosing with him with psilocybin.
Okay.
He's my own dog. I'm in a state where it is not criminal to use it. I grow it myself,
Right.
So I know what I've got. So I thought about trying that with him to see if I can get a little extra better increment. I'm nervous because I have no experience with its use in dogs, and I don't want to, and I don't think THC is good to use in dogs. I think it takes away their sense of survival. They can't see that well or hear that well. Their balance isn't that good. But that would be the next step that I would go with him. And then a third case might be epilepsy, and cancer, stress, epilepsy. Those are some good ones. And I talk about Crystal, who was this American bulldog that I treated with acupuncture and Chinese herbs for its epilepsy. But it wasn't until I added the lion's mane and I added my CBD CBG that we got better control over these treatment-resistant seizures that would oftentimes cluster up. And even though she was on strong anticonvulsant medicines and basically a walking zombie, she still had these seizures. So what our goal was to reduce the the anticonvulsant therapy, so she's more present, and try to take up the slack with other modalities like the CBD cannabinoids, like the terpenes that we find in the lion's mane. And we did get some success. Now there's epilepsy takes many flavors, and there's some out there that they're never going to respond, unfortunately. But there's others that respond really well. And if they don't have this treatment-resistant epilepsy, which doesn't respond very well to strong drugs, oftentimes they're very well managed with just CBD and lion's mane alone.
Yeah, I've heard that. We obviously have known many pet parents that have had that struggle with epilepsy with their kids, and they've had some success with CBD, and it's a complex disease as well. Those are three great stories. I can't wait till your book comes out. I'd love to have you back on once it's published and out there to come on and share the stories, more stories, all 7 stories. If you'd like to take the time doing that, because
Sure.
I mean, these are the stories that pet parents want to hear about. It may not speak to everybody in our audience, but there's going to be several that like, oh, that's exactly what I'm looking for, or that's something I want to learn more information about as well. But let's get into cannabis, because that is a hot button issue. Unfortunately, we've done a horrible job of that in the United States with it, and we're still doing a bad job with it. And in some places the end is nowhere near in sight. And I have a personal experience with it. So let's start with you before I get into my association with it. Just talk to us about our audience about your experience, what you've learned, why it's important to you, and why you're so passionate about CBD and cannabis and the plant as a whole. Because, like you were saying, the CBDG, there are a ton of there may be cannabinoids we have no idea about, right?
Well, yes, and as I said, sorry, lost that train of thought.
All right.
Okay. I'm sorry. Can you ask that question again? Sometimes when the question.
Sure. Just talk about your work with cannabis. That's all. Cannabis and CBD and companion animals.
All right. So as I said, earlier, I practiced in Colorado during the legalization of medical cannabis, and so I started to get exposed to it then. And then as an herbalist, and as a nerd, both of those stimulated me to dig down and learn more about it, and to start using it as best I could to understand better, what it can do. And so RX Vitamins, it took me about a year to convince them to carry a hemp product, but once they did, it was the most popular hemp product in the US amongst vets for a number of years before the competitor came up that did a bunch of research, I have the direct experience of probably 1 million bottles that were sold to veterinarians over a period of 6 years. And the feedback that I would get from veterinarians, even though I have retired from day-to-day practice, I still can live vicariously through the eyes and ears and hands of other veterinarians to learn how to use this stuff. And so in the process, I've become quite expert at its clinical use. But I took a job at a large hemp farm in Colorado in 2014, called Folium Biosciences, and as their chief veterinary officer. And from my work there, I learned everything. I learned about the growing, I learned about the processing, I learned about the bottling, the extracting, everything. And so I brought that information with me when I came back to start teaching veterinarians. And so my classes are very, I think are very good in terms of how I approach the plant. We now have, a veterinary cannabis society. I don't know if you're aware of that. Sounds kind of like VCS as well. It's VCS, VCS. It's a little confusing there, and they're trying to promote the safe and ethical use of cannabis and educational programs. They've just posted an online course on VIN, the Veterinary Information Network, that is being given mostly by Trina Hazza. You must have spoken with Trina.
Yes, been on our podcast.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Trina's great, and she's really the mainstay for that association, and really has been doing the lion's share of teaching there with that group of people. We recently met up with them. We had the American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association meeting just last month, and they were there. And then we had a meeting with that group of people, to get more organized. I think it's a good group. I wasn't quite sure what they were doing when they got started, but I think what they're doing is pretty good.
And you also actually have a cannabis consulting vet practice out there as well that we had on our show. I think I can't recall the name of that specifically.
Is that Trina Hazaz?
That is.
Yeah.
That is. But she's also a part. Sorry.
She has something called the frog, or the green frog.
Yeah, something like that, which sounds like but she's a tremendous advocate, and she's so passionate about it. I would imagine she has her hand. She's involved in several aspects of it, and because education is so important, Dr. Silver. Because I was alluding to my own personal experience. I've obviously had 3 cancer dogs. I've dealt with pain. I know pain. I don't know it personally, but I can only imagine what the pain they were going through. And so I was exhausted every avenue, and you just want some comfort to your mate, to your loved one. And so I've tried to talk to so many veterinarians about cannabis, about THC, before I even understood it, or where we're at now. We have a much better understanding of it now. And it just, they can't even talk about it. They can't even discuss it at all in some states. And so many are not educated, understandably so, about it. I just see, wow, that I applaud her for efforts, and that's why I wanted you. Another reason why I wanted you on the show is that whatever I can do to get the right information out to pet parents, that over here in America, especially because so many of us are still under that mistaken view that the cannabis plant is a demon plant, or but what I like is that we started the show with you talking about the difference between helpful and hurtful or toxic aspects of plants, and cannabis really falls under that, right? The category, because we know there are some parts of it that can be potentially toxic to animals, but it's the helpful things that we want, right?
Yeah, the difference between a drug and a poison is dosage.
That's
So I don't really think that cannabis is toxic to dogs, but I think that that higher dosages of THC can be problematic for the nervous system of a dog, because they have a higher density of THC receptors in their hindbrain and in their cerebellum, and
right.
that's why they react so strongly. But I think that that it's really a matter of knowing how much to use of it. And certainly they did a good job vilifying, THC, and vilifying reefer madness, all that stuff back in the 1920s, and such that people still have that same stigma associated with it. We know that THC is relatively safe. No human has ever died from taking too much THC. Several dogs have, but most of them have died because they've also taken the THC in an edible that had a toxin in it, a real toxin like chocolate, or macadamia nuts, or possibly raisins. So
let's stick to the myths and misperceptions that I was alluding to. Let's take the number one on my list, and that there's this belief that dogs can consume flour, and that has any effect whatsoever. But as you and I know, it has to be activated for it to be efficacious. And so the only thing that it will do is could potentially cause some stomach upset. But you said it perfectly, is that it's just a difference in dosing. And that's the issue. So the sooner and faster we can get the correct dosing, or how to use the product, which in itself is not fair, because when you talk about cannabis, you're talking about THCA, THCB, all the different cannabinoids. It's just a magical plant. So it's a big challenge to educate people. So how can we do a better job? What's missing in this equation in your?
Well, what's missing really is are the studies that we need to flesh out what the clinical what are some of the clinical applications for which there's objective evidence. But we also, need to look at each patient as an individual. For instance, when we're dosing CBD, or let's say cannabis, I use CBD just as kind of a marker compound, but really I mean cannabis, And I mean, all the cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids in the cannabis that have an effect, including THC. Of all of those ingredients that are in the plant, it is only THC that has that adverse effect on animals, period. And the THCA, if you're eating the bud of the plant, the flower, you're actually going to get a good effect. Now, yeah, there may be a little bit of stomach upset, but look at the things that dogs eat. I mean, eating a little bit of plant material isn't much. So all the acidic cannabinoids that are in the raw, unactivated cannabis have huge anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. For instance, CBDA is 10 to 20 times more potent than CBD. CBG, but it doesn't taste very good. I chose CBG because it's as potent as CBDA, but tastes good. Because if you don't get it into the patient, it's not going to work. And that's one of the problems that I think Vet Sciences has been having, because they're the ones that have done all these studies with CBD and CBDA that have shown a lot of benefits. But their big problem is that the palatability of their product is very difficult. That's why they've had to make it into a paste and these soft chews and things like that. It's a very effective product. I take CBDA myself for my own arthritic pain.
But I gotta say, I meant to say this at the beginning. I had no idea. I would never tell you're 74, and I could only hope to look as good as you at 74. So, but you obviously you've taken very good care of yourself. And you've used your own medicine, I would imagine.
I do. It's all tested on humans before we try
it. All right. Well, we've covered a lot. I still have so many other notes. I try to take notes.
Let's do this again. This was fun,
Well, we will. But is there anything that I left out, Dr. Silver? Anything that we didn't cover over here that you want to discuss on your end?
I think we touched on just about everything that I thought was good to touch on. I mean, gosh, I gave you 3 cases.
We got to sneak. We got to sneak
the FDA. I mean, what's left? I think we did pretty good.
That's true. We got a sneak peek at your book as well. That's great. Well. I did want to find out though, what was the name of your company? I apologize. I did not mention that. Was it Real Mushrooms?
The company is realmushrooms.com. That's the name of the website too, www.realmushrooms.com. They're a Canadian company. They've been around for 8 years and they sell most of their stuff online. So consumers can go there and get stuff for themselves. They're great mushrooms. They're the most potent mushrooms on the market, and they can get stuff for their pets as well. We have a lot of educational information there to help pet parents figure out what to do for their pets or what to do for themselves. So that's a good place. I have my own website where I sell my branded CBD, CBG products. It's called wellpetdispensary.com. And I have a blog site too, which I share with an equine holistic vet and with a board certified rehab specialist called nurseyourpet.com.
Okay.
And
so is it on the Dr. Robert Silver website, or is it on the Well Pet Dispensary website that you have resources out there for pet parents to go to?
You mean educational resources?
Correct. Educational resources.
I'm getting it together. I don't have it as together as I would like to give you today. That's what I'm working on, actively getting that together. So we do have some information there on the website. There's also a contact form that people can use called questions@gethelp.com. So where I answer direct questions directly from pet parents about what products would be best to use for them.
Well, that's good to hear, because I know that there are going to be so many people out there listening to this like, wait, hold on a second. I want to learn more about the mushrooms and cancer. I want to learn more about mushrooms and neuropathy. And so they're going to look to me to where do I find out the resources, the educational resources. So we will make sure that we put those links on our show notes for the podcast.
If they go to my website, wellpetdispensary.com, and if they sign up for a newsletter, which there's no obligation to buy, but you will get those annoying emails, we send out every week, we send out an email campaign that has information in it. and also talks about where I'm speaking, what podcasts I'm on, so that would probably be the best real-time way to keep track of me. There's another thing I wanted to say, that Real Mushrooms has a Facebook page. It's called Real Mushrooms Insiders Pet. And once a month with Real Mushrooms, we do a Facebook Live and a YouTube Live Q&A, where anyone can go on live and ask me a question, ask me an embarrassing question live, and then I answer it live. There's no pre-recording or anything. I love it. It's like a game show. It's like Stump the Stars. So I like it. I've only been stumped once. So that's once a month. It's like generally, I think the third Thursday of each month. So we have a lot of opportunities to learn, study, and interact, and get good quality products from these resources I just shared.
You certainly have given us a lot of information and resources as well, in addition to checking out the pet summits, because I think that's what we can do, again, to get the right data to the right parent at the right time, maybe a little bit before when they need it, the better. So we would love to have you back on the show, Dr. Silver, when when you have time next year, come back on, show the books out. Let's talk about more, because I know I'm going to have some additional questions. I know we're going to get some feedback from our audience on some additional questions for you. All right.
I think you're copied on the emails that I got from you guys inviting me. So I'll send you information about what you can do for your pet, for your dog with the neuropathy that way. Okay.
Please,
that would be great.
That would be great. I was actually going to take that offline, because it's a big problem, and we're looking at anything, and surgery is not. I mean, there's no other medical options out there, so we were interested in trying anything. But I didn't want to. Did not want to make this the Indiana Jones show, all about my dog. It's not about your fuzzy butt. It's about my fuzzy butt. All right, Ginger. Hold on, Dr. Silver, just 1 second. We've reached that time of the show. I know we talked a lot about cancer. Ginger, do you have a Puppy Up Foundation cancer tip for us this week?
I do, and I want to apologize for being kind of quiet. I had a dog barking in the background, so I had to mute everything.
Okay.
It's supper time.
She thinks it is. She hasn't adapted to the time change. So, pretty much, I mean, at least once or twice a month, I talk about lumps and bumps. So I decided I'm going to break it down. And while you're checking your dogs for lumps and bumps, you should always check their lymph nodes. So Luke, do you know where your dog's lymph nodes are?
Some of them. I'm not sure if I know all of them, where all of them are.
So there are 4 areas to check. So it's under the chin on either side of the neck, on the back of the hind legs, kind of behind the knees, which is one that surprised me. Then there's on the chest in front of the shoulders, and then also in the groin area.
Your groin.
So, when you're checking for lumps and bumps, I'm going to go through this every area of the dog's body to check. I'm going to die on the lumps and bumps hill, I think. But so just make sure you check those areas. If you find anything, a lot of times people will say, well, watch it and see if it grows. Just take them to the vet. I don't like to watch. I just want to take them directly to the vet, and it can be aspirated, and you can find out fairly quickly if it's anything to be really worried about, because early detection means better outcomes for your pet.
Well, and in all fairness to you, that's particularly true with lumps and bumps, because early detection, when it comes to hemangio or some of the other ones, you don't have early detection. Bone cancer, sometimes you don't know until your dog is running and then their bone snaps. So it's really important to emphasize. And as you know, we do have some DNA testing out there, some blood testing out there for certain types of cancers, but you still need to put your hands on your mates. You need to touch them, feel them, and just see what's going on. Check them out all the time, every time. That's great advice, sage advice, Ginger. Thank you so much. On that note, I'd like to thank our guest, who I look forward to having back on our show, back on Fuzzybutts and Friends. It's Dr. Robert Silver out of Colorado with Real Mushrooms, amongst all of his other projects. He's got so many crazy projects. And I know, Dr. Silver, we're going to have people that's like, I want to hire him as my personal advisor or my personal consultant, because you're so knowledgeable. So thank you for being on our show. I appreciate that.
I appreciate coming. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Indeed.
You're welcome.
Indeed. It's ours. All right, everybody. On that end, We drop every Tuesday on your podcast platforms, Spotify or iHeartRadio. We're on some of the other ones as well. But you could watch this, which I highly recommend. Dr. Silver's a very animated person, and you could always see Miss Ginger, our lovely co-host, as well. You could do that at fuzzybuttsstudios.com, our YouTube channel. Until next week, puppy up. Talk soon.
Puppy up like that.
All right, hold on.